Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, still entirely too much to do. I want to get through some housekeeping news and notes stuff, and then start to kind of unload the good takes, the bad takes. I want to start with the good because I think the good is just baseline common sense. But I want to get the good in here, the common sense good that has been said pretty much unanimously from anybody that isn't just a freaking biased troll, so that when we get to some of the, other takes, it's a nice little backdrop for how absolutely absurd it is. By the way, that slight little tinge of fall in the air has just got me feeling good. I mean, we got fantasy football, we got regular football, we got college football. I call the NFL regular football. It's just my thing, I guess. Just realized that 5 seconds ago. Got real football. That slight tinge of cool air. Got meat thawing ready for the grill. I'm ready, man. I am fired up. I kind of wish we didn't have Detroit week 1. Just random thoughts here before we kind of get started. Not that I don't think we can win, obviously, but Detroit is about as tough of an opponent as you can have week 1. And let's call that game roughly 50-50. I mean, the Packers are like 2.5-point favorites. That's still basically a 50-50 game. If the Packers happen to be on the losing side of that 50-50, it's just going to be so unbelievably negative. The negative Packer fans are going to flood into, we wasted 2 first-round picks. All the stupid people that said this was a bad decision, all the Vikings fans, the Lions fans, the Bears fans, everybody else that came, we had to hear about how good they were going to be. I thought you were going to be good. What happened? I thought you were going to be good. It's just going to be freaking miserable. The overreactions are going to be shocking. It's going to be like that first preseason game when the Packers didn't look great and everybody had a freaking meltdown times infinity. Not to mention the actual amount of suckiness. The fact that there are legitimate reasons to be annoyed by that, outside of just everyone's going to make fun of me. I kind of wish we weren't starting 0-1, and I wish our division rival didn't go up 1 game on us to start all that stuff. I don't like that they do the division rivalry week 1 thing. Give us the Cardinals. The Bengals are a good football team, but I would take the Bengals. It's an AFC team. I think the Packers beat them. I'm not even asking for the Browns, although that would be glorious. Steelers, you don't really want that week 1 with the whole Rodgers thing and all that. Give that time. I mean, I don't think you could have given us a worse matchup than the Lions. I mean, I guess the Lions in Detroit would be a worse matchup. From the Lions' perspective, this is the worst matchup you could probably get, although they would never admit that. The flip side of that, of course, is if the Packers go up 1 win, the overreactions will go too far in the other direction, and I'm going to let that happen. I'll put I'll sneak an asterisk in there somewhere, be like, you never know how these things are going to turn out. Anyways, moving on. But all right, let me burn through some of the goodies here. Not entirely sure where to start, but why not just do this? Benjamin Solak did an article. So I've kind of got this broke down into, it's hard to even categorize all these, but I've got a bunch of just Micah Parsons stats and then 14 different positive media takes. Actually, I didn't really get us through the news yet. First of all, we might as well do that. Packers did practice. Wes Hodkiewicz says, big day in Green Bay. Micah Parsons, number 1. Matthew Golden, number 0. Debut their new numbers. Savion Williams, Zane Anderson, and Barron Sorrell all returned to practice. Only Nate Hobbs and Elton Jenkins not going on today's extra Monday practice. So I guess Elton is now the guy that is the one to keep an eye on for now. Been a bunch of injuries on that offensive line, which is pretty discouraging because I don't know that it's not going to be a lingering issue. Makes me a little nervous about the depth, not necessarily that we don't have it, but just I'm nervous that we're probably going to have to rely on it, and that's never good for anybody. But we'll see. Zach Tom's had issues. Elton Jenkins has had issue. issues. Banks has had issues. It's sucky. But overall, pretty positive news. We'll have to kind of look into how the offensive line is shaking out. I know we already talked about my thoughts on how this will go if this guy's out, etc., based on the 53, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. As for Jaden Reed, this isn't necessarily new, but I had it stashed for a while. Deepak Chona, one of those sports injury folks on Twitter. Packers' Jaden Reed playing through Jones fracture, high aggravation risk in season, lean toward week 1 return with a real dip. So there's two major points here. Likelihood that he plays week 1, I'm not going to say is irrelevant. I'm happy. But there's two main things here. One is the last part where it says return week 1 with real dip. Maybe he's just talking about week 1, but I don't think so. The fact that he's expecting him to play through an injury all year and expects that to cause a real dip, I think is real. We've experienced this numerous times when guys play the season battling injuries like Kenny Clark did, like Jordan Love did, the production dips. I think it's a fair assumption. The other is the high aggravation risk thing. This sounds a lot like Jordan Love, where there's not only a dip in production, but there's also going to be every week he's going to be on the injury report. Will he, won't he? And then there's going to be he re-aggravated, he's going to be out for another 3 weeks type of a thing. I'm not saying I know this, but this is kind of the fear going into the season right now. I believe as far as Hobbs and Elton, by the way, that there is still, let's just call it a better than 50% chance that they're going to play, but obviously we'll have to track that. Talked yesterday about how Elton did return, but is maybe just not participating in team stuff at this point. I think the re-injury thing is the biggest concern, and honestly, my personal concern, considering how the Packers handled some stuff in the past with Jordan and whatnot, kind of seemingly rushing people back, that's really my only concern, especially with Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs, as a reminder, went through meniscus surgery. It's one of those things where as long as he recovers and properly heals, he's good. There's really not much to worry about. I mean, there's always the risk of, you get the fluid in the knee stuff, something went wrong with surgery, whatever. But theoretically, this is not something that should linger. It was, you did the surgery. As long as you allow it to heal, you don't rush him back, and you allow adequate recovery, it's all good. The concern is he's going to be 90% of the way, 95% of the way back. And so we're going to say good enough, put him in there week 1, and it's going to cause swelling in his knee and all this stuff. Elton is a little bit harder to project because I don't exactly know what the issue is. Back injury is a pretty broad thing. Sometimes you get a sore back, you suffer through it, and then you're just good. I've had that numerous times. You can't walk and all this stuff and, whatever. But when it goes away, it's just gone. It's not like, oh man, somebody pushed me from behind and now I have to restart my back stuff. So it kind of just depends what's wrong. Is this some kind of a chronic back injury issue? Or is it just, he's got some sciatic nerve issue or some whatever, and it's, well, I guess sciatic could be a pretty serious thing, but the way that I had it, it wasn't. It's just a sore thing that needs to go away. I don't know. That's going to be kind of the question. But either way, my concern is rushing them back. And I don't think those fears are going to be, I'm never going to know whether or not they did that. And the fact that they're not healthy enough to compete on Monday, even if by tomorrow they're ready to rock and roll, I'm still going to be questioning it or wondering if some of these guys got rushed back too soon. All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a break. We'll come back and start rushing through some of this, the positive side of the Micah Parsons news. All right, let's start with this ESPN article from Benjamin Solak. Solak is a big brain guy, pretty well respected. To call him being a biased shill or whatever the case may be by anyone that doesn't believe any of this stuff would be a really silly thing to do. He wrote an article over at ESPN, Why the Packers Need Micah Parsons, How He Fits Their Defense. The very first part of this, I think, is very appropriate. And there's another Ian Rappaport quote that goes along with what I was saying about, number one, how this is very different and how this is the kind of thing the Packers always would do. There's never been a time where they would have looked at a Micah Parsons type trade and went, meh. He starts off the article, when a player like Micah Parsons becomes available, you trade for him. Football is rarely simple, but it's simple that way. When a 26-year-old, three-time All-Pro pass rusher becomes available, you do whatever it takes to get him, and the Green Bay Packers did just that, sending 2 first-round picks and defensive tackle Kenny Clark to the Dallas Cowboys for Parsons. Parsons would have been a steal, a godsend, a boon for pretty much any team looking to acquire him, but for the Packers in particular, Parsons is what the team specifically needed. That's the more interesting part, but just before we move on, I want to reiterate for the 1000th time, this is not a rare thing for the Packers. It's kind of a weird way to put it, considering it's a rare thing to become available. But when these things happen, which are unbelievably rare, you can bet the Packers, if they don't get it done, they were trying as hard as they could to be the team that got it done. As much as you might say the Packers are not an aggressive team or whatever, that's the wrong way to phrase it. But when it comes to stuff like this, or when it comes to things like signing quarterbacks, re-signing quarterbacks, drafting quarterbacks, I don't know that there's a more aggressive team. It's funny that we look at, Reggie White and Micah Parsons and Charles Woodson and say, they rarely do things, but when they do it, it's kind of big. I think another way that you could look at it is, how weird is it that when these really rare things happen, there's a high percentage of the time that it's the Packers that end up with them. For a team that has a reputation for never doing anything, it's really odd how often they come away with those guys. I don't know how often, but it's certainly more than 1/32 of the time. But let's hear what Solak has to say about this, because again, this is a very interesting perspective that all 32 teams could use him, but the Packers in particular, this is just the absolute thing, the piece, the final puzzle piece. He goes on to say, I truly believe that if every single player in the NFL were available, contracts and quarterbacks aside, and the Packers could have traded for any single one, it still would have been Parsons. Don't get me wrong, Packers defense looked good. Talks about Halfley breathing life into it. Xavier McKinney, Edgerrin Cooper, ranks 6th in points per drive allowed, 4th in EPA per drive, 3rd highest turnover rate against their opponents in the league, generated more than 111 expected points and takeaways. Talks about Halfley and his scheme. Boston College defense fairly mundane, cover 1, cover 3, a lot of 4-man rush, not a lot of deception. But out of nowhere, his first year as an NFL coordinator showed anything but that. The Packers deployed one of the league's most creative and chaotic defenses last season, and to great effect. But splash plays are just that, splashes. Huge plays that dramatically swing games on a snap-to-snap basis. The Packers had a pass rush problem. It's not easy to find, but it's there. He says, when splitting the Packers' snaps against dropbacks and against designed rushes, we can evaluate their defensive performance through 2 metrics, EPA and success rate. EPA provides weight to high-impact plays like turnovers, third down stops, and sacks, but success rate simply measures how frequently the defense had a positive play. And in success rate against dropbacks last season, they ranked dead last, the worst defense in the NFL. That I did not know. That's just against dropbacks, not designed runs. I can see his chart here. It says they ranked 3rd, but that's still pretty wild. Unweighting splash plays might feel silly, but it helps separate noise from substance, which is fair, especially when you look at things that can be kind of fluky like picks and whatnot. Despite the fact that every defensive coordinator prioritizes takeaways, turnover rate rises and falls season to season. If the Packers rolled with the same defense in 2025 and that they deployed in 2024, an enormous swing in outcomes would rest in McKinney's hands. Literally, Green Bay's pass defense gave up 67.4% completion percentage, 8th worst, and allowed a first down on 35.4% of opposing pass attempts, 7th worst. Interceptions saved them. The good news is that the Packers are not rolling with the same defense after trading for Parsons and awarding him a 4-year, $188 million contract to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. It is important to say this clearly, as I've seen it debated and questioned over recent days. Parsons is without question one of the 2 best edge rushers playing football right now. In fact, he has probably been the best pass rusher since he entered the league in 2021. Yes, better than Myles Garrett. Parsons has generated pressure on 16.5% of his pass rush snaps, easily above Garrett's 11.9%. That's one of the interesting things as I've looked into this. I mentioned this on social media, maybe on the podcast, I don't remember. I knew that Micah Parsons was good. I knew he was one of the top pass rushers. I don't think I knew that it was kind of a two-man race between him and Myles Garrett. I would not have guessed that. But everything that I've kind of looked at sort of suggests that, and according to Solak, at least in this metric, which is a pretty important one, he has generated a pressure on 16.5% of his pass rush snaps, easily above Garrett's 11.9. Now, I don't know if those are ESPN stats or what. I generally don't like ESPN stats. NFL.com stats, I know, are also different, but it did have Parsons number one when I went and looked at it. PFF, I don't think does, but that's a third metric to look at. Goes on to say, and before you yell at me about double teams, Parsons has been double teamed on 30.6% of his pass rushes. Garrett is at 29.4%. Pressure numbers aren't everything, of course, and the sack rate numbers are much closer, 3.5% for Parsons, 3.3% for Garrett, still Parsons. I certainly believe Garrett gets more chip help against him as well. But if you wanted to argue for Parsons as the best pass rusher of this generation, it would be easy. And that's before he gets a couple more seasons of his prime while Garrett starts playing in his 30s. So the Packers didn't just get a great pass rusher, they got an unquestionably elite one. This is where, by the way, as we get into some of the more negative, if we're even going to have time for it, but some of the negative takeaways, some of the dumbest bullcrap, I swear. Vikings fans are like, yeah, well, Grenard had the same number of sacks and we pay him so much less. You are... I don't want to say stupid, and not because it's not nice, but it just doesn't fully capture the problem here. You are an unthinking ape of a human. If you can simply pull up sack numbers and then vomit out that sentence, you stupid douche canoe. Let me read that sentence again. The Packers didn't get a great pressure player. They got an unquestionably elite one. This is an enormous deal. The ever-creative Hafley was great last season at manufacturing pressure, in large part because the Packers personnel weren't good at generating it. On four-man rushes with no second-level rushers, just 4 down, 4 rushes, the Packers are 22nd in team pressure rate. Their only above average defensive lineman in pressure rate was Rashawn Gary, who got pressure on 13.4% of his rushes, the lowest single-season mark of his career. Now again, this is ignoring the part where, as he just said, that was the lowest of his career, meaning potentially you should expect some bounce back unless there's a problem specifically with Hafley, which goes against what you're saying. It also is just looking at the season as a whole. It's not looking at, breaking it up in terms of first half, second half, etc. That distinction is important. Four-man rushers with no additional blitzers. Of course, four-man rushes have no additional blitzers, but the few that send a second-level rusher fill a critical growing niche in NFL defensive schematics. These players were integral to the Packers' team's success last season. Green Bay ran more simulated pressure than any defense, save for the Ravens, who have been on the cutting edge of this approach for the past couple of years. What is a simulated pressure? Different coaches categorize things into different buckets, but we can generally define it as a play where the defense shows pressure but ends up sending 4 or fewer rushers. Now, the cool thing about this usually is a simulated pressure works even if they know you're sending 4 because you don't know which 4. The kind of overall problem here is you have to at least be able to threaten dropping one of those front 4. If you simulate sending 4, or if you simulate sending 5, 6, 7, but you always bring 4 and it's always the same 4, it's not really going to be very effective. The only real threat is that once in a while we bring 5 or 6 or whatever, and so you kind of have to worry once in a while, but as soon as those guys drop, you know who the 4 are and all that stuff. But if they're just not falling for it, then it's not really going to be massively effective. It's where, like, in college it can be extremely effective because you had, 220-pound edge rushers that can drop in coverage as well as their 220-pound linebackers. That doesn't exist in the NFL. Continuing, with this approach, coordinators get the pre-snap advantage of a blitz look. They force offensive lines to change protections and force quarterbacks to keep running backs and tight ends in to help, tricking them into throwing hot, all while not losing any bodies in coverage. Again, there has to be some level of a threat. You can send an extra guy up, but if you're just consistently doing this over and over again, That is to say, you just keep dropping and sending the same 4. They're not going to keep guys in to block. You're not going to have these advantages. In fact, it becomes a disadvantage because guys that are dropping into coverage are starting from a not great position. He shows an example of a play, and this is how you get it to work, even though people hate it. Why would you drop an edge rusher into coverage? This is why, because it's the only way to make these things work. He says the 5 outside linemen have the 5 down defensive linemen in protection, but that's not who rushes. Linebacker Quay Walker blitzes down the pipe from depth, while Enigbare and McDuffie peel off the line of scrimmage and drop into zone coverage. The result is that 3 Dolphins offensive linemen are left blocking the nose tackle while Walker screams down the middle, particularly unimpeded. Kenny Clark cleans the play up with a sack. The design has the effect of a blitz occupying the pass protection to create free rushers, blah, 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 blah. Goes on to say only 4 teams played more zone last season than the Packers, in large part because they didn't want to blitz and have to play man coverage behind. They wanted to simulate the blitz and get to play zone coverage behind. Let's spin this forward to 2025. While Parsons certainly doesn't need simulated pressures to succeed as a rusher, Hafley can manipulate the front and manipulate protection rules. The whole manipulating protection rules thing is that essentially the offensive line can kind of, they have more options, more flexibility, and can be more imposing on you when it's a 4-man front and we have 5 guys plus maybe a tight end or whatever. When we have 5 guys across the line, they now shift into simple man-to-man blocking. Everybody gets the guy in front of them. Anyways, continuing on. Hafley can manipulate the front with the intention of hiding Parsons from the protection slide or chip help. Now here's an interesting little nugget. So he shows another sample. This is against Detroit. Interesting, because we got week 1 coming up. We'll have to pay attention to how Hafley uses Mr. Parsons. But he said, here's a simulated pressure week 14 against Detroit with a really wonka front. I almost said Willy Wonka front. Really wonky front. Defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt is isolated on one edge, while 2 edge rushers, Gary and Mosby, are stacked beside one another on the opposite side, along with Clark. The Lions pick up the rush nicely, in large part because they feel comfortable leaving right tackle Penei Sewell in his one-on-one matchup with Gary, who ends up with a 2-way go and plenty of space to rush inside or outside of Sewell. Now, imagine if that 2-way go belonged to Parsons and not Gary. In other words, something to think about, would Detroit feel as comfortable with a one-on-one? Or the flip side of that is, if Hafley is able to manipulate Gary into a one-on-one with Penei Sewell, that the Lions, in other words, are like, okay, we're not going to do anything about that because we feel okay with that. Hafley may try to manipulate that as well because we want to get our guys as many one-on-one opportunities as possible. I'm interested to see if Detroit says, fine, go ahead, we trust Sewell. He goes on to say, lest we forget about the last time Parsons and Sewell played. Parsons rushed against Sewell 18 times and generated 5 pressures. That's crazy. That's like 30% against one of the best tackles in football. He goes on to say it's the only 5-pressure game a player has had against Sewell in the past 3 seasons. In case I haven't banged the drum enough yet, Parsons is so ridiculously good. Think about that. The Packers are basically saying if we can get any one-on-one matchup, we feel good. As you know, I'm a fan of Rashawn Gary. I like Rashawn. Rashawn is a better than average pass rusher. But the Lions saying we'll happily take a one-on-one with Penei Sewell and Rashawn Gary, I mean, I don't know. Not saying he can't win against Penei Sewell, but I don't know that that's going to be one that we're going to get a ton of success from. If you can get a 30% success rate from Micah Parsons against Penei Sewell, that's crazy. When Parsons got a new defensive coordinator in Dallas last season, and Mike Zimmer, there was some excitement that he might line up more often in the A and B gaps as a spinner, which is our football term for when a traditional edge rusher stands up as an interior gap. Spinners can be integral parts of the simulated pressure look. Remember the viral clip of Garrett doing pre-snap dribble crossovers over the center. He was a spinner. Parsons fosters this sort of excitement because of his background as an off-ball linebacker, which is where things get really interesting. I don't know how often Hafley's going to want to do that, using him on the interior, but he's so unbelievably good as a pass rusher from the interior and has an entire history of being an inside linebacker, meaning it's not just it's not like dropping in Enigbare. This is putting him back at a position that he legitimately can play and play well. He went on to say, though, but it didn't really happen. He played 85% of his snaps off the edge, his highest rate of edge snaps in a season, and it won't happen too often in Green Bay with these fronts either. The point isn't to place Parsons on the interior to stress protections. The point is to stress protections with the other guys to maximize Parsons on the edge. With that said, man, it's going to be cool when the Packers use him on the interior. It's not nearly the lion's share of his snaps, but Parsons is ridiculously effective as an interior rusher. Since entering the league, he has had a pass rush win rate at defensive tackle of 33.7%, admittedly only on 32 attempts. For perspective, Chris Jones over that stretch is 19.6%, which would be presumably the best interior pass rusher in the NFL, as in defensive tackle. The flow from Parsons to Hafley will accordingly go both ways. Hafley will scheme up fronts and simulated pressure packages that create good rush opportunities for Parsons, and he will scheme them up to take advantage of Parsons' gravity in order to win elsewhere. So it ends up almost being sort of a win-win. If you want to focus all your attention on Parsons, if we can use that sort of gravitational pull, as he put it, to pull all your attention over that way, then we're going to try to find ways to get the other guys to win. On the other hand, we're also going to try to find ways to get him in one-on-one opportunities because we believe he's going to win that at an incredibly high rate. Parsons has the prowess off the edge to demand more than one tackle's worth of blocking attention, which limits an offense's ability to send help to the pressure side. The other thing, and you think about this like when the Packers go up against top pass rushers, and I'm just saying top as in any of the top 10 guys, much less a top 2 guy. When you have to focus your running back on chip blocks or your tight end on chip blocks, that severely limits your pass game. You're taking somebody out of the pass game running routes to stay in to help chip block. Think about every single opponent we're going to face is going to have to be down a receiver. And the moment they don't do that is the moment that Parsons and Rashawn and Van Ness and Devontae Wyatt are going to freaking run wild. This is the kind of luxury that the Lions have with a guy like Hutchinson, although the drop-off after Hutchinson is significant, so it's not quite like this. It's kind of like the Steelers, for example, who have, good pass rushers and also one of the top pass rushers in football in Watt. Goes on to say, plus he has the versatility to move around the line, which makes it even harder for opposing offenses to game plan against Hafley. They'll feed off one another. That's the other thing. Can you imagine having almost like a man coverage thing for a chipping tight end? They're not going to do it. They might keep an extra tight end off the line, so you might have like a Penei Sewell and a tight end off that side, which would be ridiculous, by the way, if they actually felt the need to do that. But what happens when Micah Parsons gets up and walks to the middle of the formation? Is that tight end going to follow him? Are they going to have some kind of an adaptive offense where if Parsons isn't off that edge anymore and he swaps with somebody else or whatever the case may be, that he's going to go run a route and the running back is going to stay into chip? I mean, maybe. I don't know. But the point is, from my perspective, I think the defense is going to be dictating to the offense much more than the other way around. And that's critical. But he's not done, not by a long shot. But that isn't where the Packers will benefit off Parsons' game the most, not even close. They were already a good simulated pressure team without him. And because simulating pressure is largely a numbers game, they don't need an elite rusher to make it work. Recall, this team was 22nd in pressure rate on traditional four-man rushes. It's the Packers' base pass rush that needs help. Simulated pressures are designed for defenses. Simulated pressures are designer defenses. They're only available when you know what you're getting. And as such, they're almost always called on long and late downs when a dropback is nearly certain. Which makes sense, right? Third down's coming, now we can pin their ears back and we can do crazy stuff. First down, second down, little bit iffy. I have a feeling he's going to talk about that, by the way, because he posted a graphic about this that, actually I can see, the graphic is in the article. It's shocking. This is such a good article, this might just take the whole episode. I don't even care. It's extremely difficult to call simulated pressures on early downs, as those packages include dropping a defensive lineman off the line of scrimmage. Imagine 1st and 10 handoff against a pressure that drops a defensive tackle off the line. Uh-oh. And that, too, is one of those things where it's like you can mug up the linebackers and pretend you're going to do it or be like, oh, you don't know what we're going to do. But the offense probably is going to say, yeah, we do. So you're an idiot. It's kind of just a question of, is one of those linebackers actually going to come or not? And which one? That's kind of the benefit of mugging the linebackers in that situation. But you're not really tricking them in terms of like the full buffet of possibilities here. For this exact reason, the Packers are a dramatically different team on early downs relative to late downs in 2024. They had a 25.9% pressure rate on first and second down, when their full menu of simulated pressures was not available to them. 10th lowest. On 3rd and 4th down, they had a pressure rate of 39.7%, 10th highest. So on 1st and 2nd down, when the Packers guys were just 4 across the line and needed to win, they were the 10th worst group. When Hafley could get in his bag and get creative and try to force things and manipulate offenses to make things work and take advantage of their weaknesses and our strengths and all that kind of stuff, they jumped up to 10th best. He says, but it goes beyond just pressure rate. Remember, by success rate, this was the worst defense against opposing dropbacks last season. Green Bay got the splash takeaway, but from down-to-down basis, it was susceptible. A critical Jenga piece falls when we remove the simulated pressure from the defensive system. Now, Hafley's reliance on zone coverage and the Packers' lack of quality man coverage corners, which we do have, forces the defense to become a bend-don't-break until it surrenders the easy underneath completions, which is kind of true, right? You kind of just live to play another down, and then you try to get that ball. You try to get that big play. You try to get that sack, that pick, the turnover, the forced fumble, whatever. And without a strong 4-down pass rusher, good NFL quarterbacks can sit back and pick the zones apart further down the field. The 2 Lions games, both losses, mind you, were perfect examples. Against that fearsome offensive front, which had no qualms leaving Sewell on an island against Gary, the Packers had early down pressure rates of 16.1 and 14.3. Presumably that's 1st and 2nd down. Unsurprisingly, these were also 2 of the 3 games in which they actually blitzed the most. They needed the extra bodies this time. If defenses couldn't affect Jared Goff, they couldn't really stop the Lions' offense last season, and Green Bay rarely did in those 2 games. Goff nickel and dime down the field with a 79.4% completion rate and 59% success rate. Goff's success rate on dropbacks were the 3rd and 4th worst games the Packers defense surrendered last season. The 2 worst, the pair of games against Sam Darnold and the Vikings, both losses again. There's nothing schematically interesting to say that about these games beside Green Bay got mollywopped. That's quite a word. Hafley's defense was all about finding creative ways to succeed without elite corners or pass rushers, and the Vikings simply could not be out-schemed. It's a very fair point. You get a really good offensive mind, good luck. Darnold had a 91.1 QBR against man coverage in the first matchup, the worst QBR the Packers surrendered in man all season, and then an 81.1 QBR against zone coverage in the second one, the worst QBR the Packers surrendered in zone all season. Darnold rolled out a 74.6% completion percentage and 62% success rate. That's the thing about scheming up wins. Eventually the other guy's really good at it too. Whether it comes in divisional games in which the Packers went 1-5 or facing playoff opponents against whom Green Bay went 2-5 in the regular season and then lost the first round of the actual playoffs, there's a hard ceiling. Now again, I will put in my caveat here for those that want to read too much into that, and I don't think he's doing that necessarily. It's not the case that they only beat up on crap teams and then the second they saw any competent team, they lost. These are mega elite teams last year. We're talking 14-win teams plus. But the point still stands, and this is going to be a problem in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. You can be a really good team, but, if you have any kind of weakness, and let's say your weakness happens to be you've got brilliant coaches that can scheme things, that's cool to a point. But what if you have brilliant coaches who can scheme things that also have dominant players? That's tough. You're asking a lot here. Coordinators can't win on the chalkboard anymore. That's when the stars take over. And the Packers didn't have enough stars on defense last season, plain and simple. What's cool and nerdy about the Parsons acquisition is how he gets used in the simulated pressure package. But what's important, so in other words, what's interesting is the simulation. What's important about Parsons is the degree to which he elevates the Packers defense outside of the scheme. It's how often he takes a boring old 1st and 10, dusts a tackle clean off the edge, and puts the defense in a 2nd and long. Since entering the NFL, he is the best early down pressure player by a century mile. This is something that had been going on for a long time. It does come from ESPN tracking, so I guess take it with a grain of salt. Pressure rate on 1st and 2nd down, i.e. not pass rush downs, since 2021. So we're talking 4 years. This is since Parsons came into the league. If we look at, for example, top 10, Harold Landry, I believe, is number 10. The numbers aren't posted, but let's just say it's roughly 9%. It is a slow climb up to about where, let's say, I don't know, Max Crosby. The things are all kind of, the lines aren't really where they're supposed to. The point is, though, you get the idea. It's a very slow climb out to, I think, Max Crosby at about 10%. Then there's a pretty big jump. And that jump is Myles Garrett. And that's 8%. Small font. And I can't make the image bigger. So think about that. It's 8, 8.2, 8.3, 8.5, 8.7, whatever. Up to about 10%. And there's a decent jump before that. And then there's a big jump out to Myles Garrett at 11.8. Micah Parsons is number 1 at 15.3. I'm trying to think of a way to kind of visualize this. Think about it in terms of like if you were, I don't know, traveling. And it would be like we went from California to Nevada to Utah to Colorado. And then from there, we went to Missouri. Like we skipped a state. Micah Parsons would be like, from Missouri, we went to Maine. It's like little jump, 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 little jump. Pretty big jump. Shockingly big jump. We're talking 4% jump from the number 2 guy to the number 1 guy in Micah Parsons. And we're talking about first and second down pressure rates. And there are guys on here, we're talking, I mean, think about how scary we've played these guys, and think about how scary it is to play them. Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, right? Remember some of the matchups against him and some of the trash talking and all that? Von Miller, probably toward the end of his career, but still shocking. Aiden Hutchinson, who we face twice a year. Khalil Mack, again, kind of toward the end, even though he's still a very good pass rusher, and it goes back 4 years. Chris Jones, how terrifying that guy is. Josh Allen, Harold Landry, Brian Burns, Aaron Donald, Matt Judon, Hassan Reddick, Cam Jordan, Emmanuel Ogbah, like, some we play more than others. But just to give you, I would love to know historically who's been able to generate over at least a 4-year period a 15.3% pressure rate on first and second down. And I will point out, there are not any Packers on this list. And again, I don't necessarily mean that to be some kind of a massive knock, because this is just the top of the top. But for whatever we like Rashawn Gary for, and being a good pass rusher and all that, even when he had better years, he's not even in this top 20 list here. I'm just trying to even for myself, quantify the magnitude of how good this guy is, to where on first and second down, we don't have to screw around. We don't have to mug up the line. We don't have to do anything but just say, here's the 4. You know what we're doing. Frickin' best of luck. Detractors will quickly say Parsons sacrifices his run defense on the way to the quarterback. This is probably true, which, by the way, I've more thought about this than actually proved this in any kind of way, but people have been kind of ragging on, well, he's a terrible run defender and all that, which is overstated. He might not be as good as some of the other guys, these monsters off the edge, but I do think his sole focus is get to the quarterback, and once in a while he's doing stuff to get to the quarterback that can sacrifice that run. I couldn't give less of a crap about that. Edgerrin, watch out over to that side, okay, because he's busy trying to get to the quarterback and he might miss some stuff. Try to fly over there if you can. All right, corners, watch out. You're probably still playing zone coverage if we can help it. Keep your eyes downfield. Come down, smoke somebody, all right? He says this is probably true. Since 2022, Parsons' stuff rate is 2.6%. Average for NFL rushers is 3.1%. His stop rate is 8.1%. The average is 9.1%, according to NFL Next Gen stats. He's below average, but not significantly, which is kind of the point that I would make. And honestly, when you look at a lot of other guys, he's not. I mean, again, Kenny Clark, pretty much the same. I mean, again, I don't want to downplay it too much, like it wouldn't be awesome if he was also an elite run defender. TJ Watt has a 90 pass rush grade and a 90 run defense grade. That's obviously freaking awesome. But he's also the only one. And there are only 6 with 80 or higher. And there's only 31 with 70 or higher. So not even quite enough for one for every team. And it's not, it's not remember, 60 is baseline average for PFF. I know Solak is using different stats saying he's slightly below average. And it's a different meaning of the word average. But leaving that aside, PFF gives him a 65.5, which is to say slightly above average. But so is Von Miller and Odafe Owe and Leitu Latu and Jadeveon Clowney and Brian Burns and Nick Benito, George Karlaftis. I'm just picking all the good pass rushers. He's got a 56 run defense grade. Chop Robinson, who's a great pass rusher, 55. Zadarius, who's still pass rushing at almost in the 80s, has a 55 run defense grade. Nick Herbig, who's one of the best pass rushers in football last year in Pittsburgh with a 92 grade, had a 48 run defense grade. Baron Browning, 43. Durance Armstrong, 41. Will McDonald, edge rusher that a lot of people wanted for the Packers, 39 run defense grade. Peyton Turner, 40. So, yeah, it would be cool if it was a little higher, but it's really not a liability. Rashawn Gary has a 73. He's one of the few good run defending edge rushers of the, 31. Kingsley is right about the same at a 66. Van Ness had a 44 last year. We're obviously hoping that improves. But then look at the defensive tackles. Kenny, 58. Wyatt, 52. Wooden, 47. Slayton, 44. Carl Brooks, 39. And the run defense was actually quite good last year. So he's going to come in and be like our second to third best run defender along the defensive line, depending on how guys, how it sorts out. But if it's like last year, you got Rashawn, and then after that is Kingsley, and all in the same group. You got Mosby, Enigbare, Brenton Cox, and Micah Parsons in that mid-60s range. And that would be sort of the second tier of run defenders. So, the idea that he's so bad they're just going to run at him and it's going to be just this net. No, that's not correct. Maybe in different situations, maybe on a different team, he would be the weakest link. I don't know what team that would be. Somebody had said it was Dallas, they actually had competent run defense. No, they didn't. Micah Parsons was their best run defender on the entire team for the defensive line and edge. 12 different players with no filters. In other words, I'm not even taking into a guy that played 4 snaps would be included in this. He was their number one run defender. So why they would choose to just run at Micah Parsons? No idea why they would do that. Why not run at Mozzie Smith, the starting defensive tackle with a 36 run defense grade? Why not run at Odigizua or Chauncey Golston, the other starting edge rusher, the guy that actually played the most snaps off the edge, who had a 56 run defense grade? He even goes on to say in the article, he's below average but not significantly, and certainly not significantly enough to hang the Cowboys' run defense problems on him when Mozzie Smith and Osa Odigizua are the defensive tackles. In other words, dog crap. The run defense considerations are almost immaterial. The only reason we're bringing them up is because the Cowboys owner general manager Jerry Jones said run defense about 142 times in his post-trade news conference, which is true. He tried to make it a thing where it's he's so bad at run defense and Kenny Clark is so good. No, Kenny Clark had a worse run defense grade, and it's not to say that that's the exact same thing. We're talking about different positions and whatnot, but he did. He had a worse run defense grade than Micah Parsons did. He is not going to significantly upgrade your run defense. In fact, we even talked about this down the stretch, not really including last year, but we'll chalk it up to injury. Down the stretch in his career, he is a pure pass rusher. It's the only thing he's ever good at. The run defense hasn't been good since Mike Pettin. But Jerry Jones tried to make that a thing, and so a bunch of Cowboys fans and a few other people try to hang their hat on that, yeah, but he's so bad against him, we're just going to run at him. No, you're not. Your understanding of football comes from Jerry Jones, okay? That's why you're not very good at this. Be quiet. You could say it's people that are making fun of PFF are getting their information from Jerry Jones, all right? You can't tell me anything. Of course, the Cowboys needed to get better in run defense. It's just a totally pointless endeavor if you trade arguably the best defensive player alive in the process. Of course, the Packers need to dedicate more resources to their early down run defense now that Parsons is on the field and Clark is off it. I disagree. But they are thrilled to do so because Parsons solves their base pass rush problem, right? It's kind of like in the process of winning the freaking lottery and getting $10 million, we crashed our car and now owe, $10,000 in damages. And people are going to sit here and be like, you crashed your car. Yeah, but you crashed your car. Cowboys have a car now. You don't have a car. You crashed your car. $10,000. You crashed your car. Won $10 million, you freaking moron. I'll be fine. I'm going to buy 7 cars. Shut up. He solves their Vikings and Lions problem, and he turns them from a defense that punches above its weight into a defense that punches against heavyweights. The hay isn't in the barn just yet. Parsons was a late add to the team and will take some time to get up to schematic speed. He's going to be used creatively, and that requires trials. He's going to be used in blitz and twist packages, and that requires chemistry built over time. And besides, the Packers' corner room remains thin even after free agent signing of Nate Hobbs. I'm not convinced they'll be able to play man coverage as much as they like. I should also add that I just saw a notification saying that Micah Parsons is going to be taking back injections to deal with his pain problem. Because, of course, every Green Bay Packer has freaking back problems. So the piggyback rides, I don't understand. They did make it seem like it was a temporary measure, though. In other words, he's going to be okay, maybe not quite by week 1, so they're going to give him pain meds week 1, but he'll continue to improve and hopefully not need that. That's the hope. I don't know. Anyways, final paragraph. Last season proved the Packers have a legit defensive coordinator for the first time in years. Now they have a star defensive player, an unquestionably elite blue chip, auto defensive player of the year candidate star. I'll put my faith in this working. I'll put my faith in a Super Bowl caliber defense developing in Green Bay this season. And with an offense that has been approaching the crest for years now, there's no reason Parsons shouldn't see something the Cowboys never gave him, an appearance in the NFC Championship game. All right? Kind of wanted to just grab a couple points out of there, but that was such a beautiful piece of art. I couldn't not just go through it. So, let's take a break. I want to go through the rest of the positives, I think, and we'll maybe save some of the negatives because they're so stupid. But we'll grab some of the stats and whatnot. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. So there's another article by Dara, Irish Packers beat reporter. Seems to be a similar article, how the Packers will use Micah Parsons' schematic breakdown. Now, I point to this article, which I would encourage you to read, assuming we don't just go through the whole thing right now. But he pointed to some stats here. Now, I believe, let me just check and see what he writes here. It doesn't seem to be listed. I believe at one point at least, he was working for PFF because he's got some PFF stats that the public is not privy to. But one of the things he wrote, Micah Parsons has a 99.9 PFF grade as a mugged-up blitzing linebacker. This is kind of what was talked about before. He's probably not going to do this a ton, but how do you pass up on a 99.9? He says that's not a typo, 99.9. The next closest player is 92.1. That player, by the way, Edgerrin Cooper. I'm not Jeff Hafley. I'm not even Jeff Hafley's freaking neighbor, all right? I in no way can I even pretend to understand what Hafley has in mind. But when you hear these things, when you think about these things, the fact that we have Van Ness and Rashawn, if we want to put Micah on the inside, the fact that we have the two highest mugged-up linebacker blitzing graded players in Edgerrin Cooper and Micah Parsons, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. Edgerrin Cooper, by the way, probably is a big part of the reason why when you hear Solak talk about how they were a really bad first and second down team, and then come passing situations, they jumped up to top 10 as we designed some. I'm sure Edgerrin Cooper had a big part in that. In the article, again, encourage you to go read it. A little bit of the ways down, where will Micah Parsons line up? It says anywhere. It says the Packers didn't surrender anyone at either edge or linebacker to get this trade over the line, so essentially adding Micah Parsons to a group we've already felt quite good about entering 2025. The versatility Parsons brings is something Dallas didn't always exploit. Jeff Hafley has a great opportunity to get creative with Parsons among a much deeper front seven. In nickel defense, which Hafley ran on 65% of snaps last year, Parsons obviously slots in on the edge opposite Rashawn Gary, taking the place of Lucas Van Ness, who may kick inside to 3-tech, especially on passing downs. That's something else to consider. Having 3 pass rushers on the field is not going to be a rare thing, I don't think. It's just a question of, do we have our 2 edge guys and Parsons does something crazy? Do we have Parsons and Rashawn and Van Ness kicks inside, which we've been talking about and they've been playing with for a long time anyways? Even Rashawn could certainly kick inside in different situations where we could have Van Ness and Parsons on the outside with Rashawn kicking inside. And maybe you just slap Stackhouse in there to be your sort of one stout run defender or something to that effect. Or if you want to just get wild, just put Wyatt in there and you get your 4 pass rushers. When the Packers play in their base 4-3 defense, not only can you keep Parsons as a major threat off the edge, you can also kick him back to his native off-ball linebacker spot, joining forces with Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper to create the fastest, scariest base linebacker trio in football, all while retaining your original 2 edge rushers in Gary and Van Ness with depth off the bench in the form of Barron Sorrell, Kingsley Enagbare, and others. Since converting to edge rusher full-time 3 years ago, Parsons has played 119 coverage snaps for the Cowboys. Compare that to Rashawn Gary, who's played just 8 coverage snaps over the same time frame. This is what I was talking about before, where it's not just some stupid, like, take your vitamins or eat your vegetables thing, where sometimes you got to drop a guy just to keep him honest or whatever. I'm not saying he's great at it, but he can do it. He is an inside linebacker. This is what he does. By the way, this is a separate point I wanted to talk about altogether, but Micah's tantalizing 4.36 40-yard dash time makes Walker and Cooper's 4.51 scores sound slow. Bear in mind that the latter pair are in the 97th percentile of NFL linebackers in the 40. So Walker and Cooper are some of the most fast, athletic freaks, whatever, and it's not even in the same ballpark as Micah Parsons. 4.36. He is one of the fastest players on our entire team, period. And he is an edge rusher. He is faster than most of our corners, most of our wide receivers, our safeties. I think all of our safeties. Not sure where Bullard was at. He's pretty quick. I don't think it was 4.36, though. Oh, no, he's 4.47. I was thinking of, what's his name that's gone now. So, again, when you talk about creativity, all I want is the most creative defensive mind in control of this, because I can't even fathom the madness you can concoct with a human being like this. Here's the quote that I had mentioned, I think, on the podcast a few days ago. He would be the second fastest corner on the Packers depth chart, 0.02 of a second slower than Bo Melton, all while carrying an additional 61 pounds. Listen, and this is where, listen, if you're one of the elite pass rushers in football, you're a freak. I mean, Myles Garrett is a freak among freaks. The way he moves and all that. TJ Watt, his ability to bend at that size and all that. But his size-speed combination is not human. It's not supposed to happen. There are certain things built into our DNA to be like, yeah, there are limits, and whatever that thing is, sometimes it breaks. Micah Parsons is a freak. He's a defect. He's defective. He made it out of the factory, and he wasn't supposed to. Next line in the article says, that athleticism allows Parsons to line up wherever he damn well pleases. Double A gap pressure with Parsons and Cooper sounds good to me. Dropping off into coverage to match a tight end or slot receiver on a hook curl, he can do that too. Pin his ears back and run literal rings around your offensive tackles. That's what he was born to do. Oh, and don't get me started on your running back through your interior lineman. Parsons has an 83 career pass rushing snaps. As a mugged-up linebacker, his PFF grade on these plays, 99.9. Talked about that on the thing. This duo is an interior offensive lineman's worst nightmare. That's Cooper and Parsons. Good Lord, I can't. Maybe they're going to roll them out slowly, and it's going to be very simple. It's going to be Rashawn and Parsons off the edge. 4 down linemen. Maybe get a little goofy on 3rd down with some extra pressure. Just week 1, we're going to ease into this thing. But I'm going to be... obviously, you want your offense on the field as much as is humanly possible. And I don't know if I saved the video or not, so I'll just say it now. Somebody had made the point, I think I did save the video, but it's fine. The Packers need to be like the most aggressive offense in football because you need to have the mentality, I'm not worried about it. The defense is going to get them off the field. We're going to get the ball back. So 4th down, all this stuff, like we're going for it. And I don't know that isn't correct. He also has a section on what about stopping the run? This is the one question Packers will be asked over and over again in the coming weeks. They've just had to sacrifice their premier interior defender in Kenny Clark to land a generational pass rush talent. Again, I'm slightly rolling my eyes at the structure of that sentence. Sorry, Kenny, it is what it is. Parsons has never been an elite run defender. His career PFF run defense grades of 61, 74, 66, and 65 are above average, but pale in comparison to an astonishing pass rushing grade of 93, 92, 94, and 92. Parsons is by no means a liability when opponents hand the ball off, but when compared to the run-stopping ability of edge defenders the Packers already had on the roster, the upgrade is only marginal. Overall, this is a net downgrade for the Packers' run defense. That may be the truth when you look at the very modest to non-existent upgrade at run defense on the edge and the downgrade of run defense at defensive tackle by replacement. But again, I don't freaking care. From there, he kind of just goes on to talk about I'm curious how the D tackle situation is going to pan out. And I also am very curious. That's something we're going to have to explore at a later date in the next couple days or so, trying to sort out what we think might happen along the defensive line, because Parsons adds another weird and interesting dimension to that. Do you see Van Ness more on the interior? Maybe a little bit extra Rashawn to kind of help cover that? Or is it just a massive promotion for guys like Wyatt and Brooks, which seems to be what a lot of people are leaning toward right now? I don't know. We get another article here, this one from Bill Barnwell over at ESPN, what the Micah Parsons trade means for the Cowboys and Packers. Again, I'm only going through this because people have found some wild statistics going through their stuff, and we're going to talk about a few of those. Second paragraph down, Parsons is a sort of young superstar at a critical position who isn't supposed to ever hit the market. Again, if we can circle back, this is not like some third-rate 30-year-old or some mid-rate rookie who ends up slipping. This is rare, never, ever, ever happens, shouldn't ever happen. Under any circumstance, you never let a generational player like this walk out the door. Organizations pray that they'll land someone that as impactful in the draft as Parsons. Even while missing 4 games last season with a high ankle sprain, the Penn State product became the second player in NFL history to rack up 12 or more sacks in each of his first 4 seasons. The only other one to do that is another player Packers fans came to love, Reggie White. Talked about that stat already. Shocking stat. And again, you don't want to put him there, right? As a Packer fan especially, you know, it's hard enough to argue that he's even the best today, much less the best since Reggie White. But you start looking at some of the stats, and it's like, depending on where you look, it's hilarious to me, by the way, that people talk, he's never had more than, or yeah, somebody said never had more than 14 sacks in the season, which isn't true. He had 16 one year. But supposedly, like, these low sack numbers, like he's never cracked 18 or 20 or something, is some kind of a big knock. But the fact that he's the only person to go 4 years, his first 4 years with 12 or more sacks, what does that tell you about these other guys? Why did Myles Garrett not do that? Why didn't TJ Watt do that? The other funny thing about it, when you look at Woodson and when you look at Reggie White, as much as you can see the parallels and all that, and again, you don't want to put them in that category because you don't want to pretend until something magical happens, or unless and until something magical happens. But those are 2 guys that were kind of at the back end, like, you know, I don't want to say back end of their career, but they had accomplished a lot already. You're talking 30-plus-year-olds. Parsons just turned 26. That's a big difference between he and Reggie and Charles Woodson. This is a player entering his prime. Now, we are fortunate in that Charles Woodson revived his career here and played as well or better than he had anywhere else, and same with Reggie White. It wasn't like, well, we got him when everything was falling apart. He was great for the Eagles, came here and was just as good, if not better. Goes through a couple different things here. What are the Cowboys thinking? Three arguments come to mind. Number 1, Jerry Jones believed he had been betrayed, decided to take a stand against the player and an agent on principle, which is just stupid. This is a swallow your pride thing. I don't care. Number 2, the Cowboys decided they couldn't win with their existing roster construction if they paid Parsons. I don't understand that either. If you're worried about the money, don't pay someone else. You shouldn't have paid Dak, maybe. Also, you could have paid him last year, but didn't because you're stupid. 3, Jones believed the Cowboys could be disappointing on defense even with Parsons in the lineup. Echoing the same logic the Bengals might have been using as they negotiated with Trey Hendrickson, Jones and the Cowboys had a very recent evidence that Parsons alone wasn't a guarantee of a great defensive season. In 2024, the Cowboys ranked 29th in EPA per play and points allowed per possession. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people point to this as well. Oh, if he's so great, why were they so bad? As though the argument is, with him, you can't be bad. It's not what anybody's saying. The argument has to do with how much better it's making you. So really, you have 2 options here. Number 1, you can say that he's really not that good. Or number 2, you can say that despite being as elite as he is, which all the stats would point to, so I don't know why that wouldn't be your stance, they were still 29th, which tells you how bad they were despite him. Not because of him. A little further down, well, he says, of course, there are 10 other players on defense, and I'm not sure I'd pin many of those problems on Parsons. And then in the next paragraph, it says, over the past 4 years, the Cowboys were the league's best defense with Parsons on the field by EPA per play. That's the other thing. We're looking at a very small sample size of a team that played like crap last year, forgetting the fact that 2 years ago, they were actually very, very good. And presumably the year before that and the year before that. When Parsons was on the field, number 1 defense by EPA per play. Across 1,039 snaps, those same Cowboys immediately became the league's worst defense by the same metric when Parsons was on the sidelines or inactive. Well, if he's so good, then... Did you hear what I just said? Worst team in football with him not on the field. Best team in football with him on the field. Now again, that's not a guarantee that he automatically makes that happen, but he makes you better. And in this case, unbelievably better. He says, acknowledging that every team is going to get worse when its best player isn't playing, I'm not sure anything I can tell you is going to be more instructive than those figures. The best defense in the league with Micah Parsons, worst defense in the league without him. What other information does any human being on earth need? All right, well, we obviously didn't get through everything I wanted to. Got through about 10% of what I wanted to do, but all very, very good, informative information about this new piece and what it could mean. I am concerned about the injuries coming into this season. I don't like that the brand new corner we went out and got is hurt. I don't like that the brand new guard we went out and got is hurt. I don't like that our star right tackle that we just paid is hurt. I don't like that our center that just moved into center that we think can be a Pro Bowl center is hurt and might not play. I don't like that we just paid the moon and the stars for an elite pass rusher that is hurt and might need injections to be able to play. I don't like that Christian Watson is hurt or out. I don't like that Savion Williams is hurt. I don't like that Jaden Reed is hurt and it might be something that lingers all year. Don't like that we lost Marshawn Lloyd again. This is all very, very frustrating and very, very annoying. With that said, I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited. So, all right, I'm going to go. I got to get Packernet After Dark rocking and rolling here. You all have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.